What up, y'all? Appreciate you showing up, hanging out, listening to my dumb ass. Like and subscribe. So, I watched Destin Legary's interview with your boy Michael Pachter. Now I know a lot of y'all be like, "Oh, Michael Pachter's always wrong with what he says. He don't know what he's talking about." Blah blah blah. And if I were to just ancillarily kind of hear ancillarily, did I say that right? And whatever. Anecdotally, the anecdotal evidence of those sentiments would be true because a lot of people said that. But if you listen to the interview and you listen to Michael Pachter's words, he sounds like a very smart guy. And one thing he did say was that he bases a lot of his predictions on past cycles and behaviors, right? So, he says, oh, the crash of this and this happened and that happened, and, things happen in cycles, and he's right. That is exactly right. So I was like, oh, okay, so I got a little insight on that, and to try to listen to some of the stuff that he says that I have no idea about, because he's a super smart dude. And he knows a lot about not just video games, but just trends and, business in general. He's Web Bush Morgan, right? That's it. So he's like, he's a bank dude. It's about money. It's not just about video games. But anyway, Destin was talking to him, asking him about the CMA and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And he had some choice words for Sony to describe Sony. He called them crybabies multiple times. At least twice he said crybaby or something to that effect. He didn't say it like lackadaisical. He shouted them out. For real. I'm like, wow, Mike don't play. And he said like the behavior that they're doing, that they're desperate, or somebody else said that too, but that they seem like they're desperate at this point because they're just trying to throw anything at it to slow it down or stop it. And it's not going to happen. And what I heard, what he explained was the same thing that I said, was if the CMA blocks the deal, if they block the deal, then Xbox, Microsoft would just set up a CPT, I think it wasn't CPT, it was a PTC, something like that. They call it different. It's a separate corporation for them to handle the business of Activision Blizzard. And what would happen was nothing. It would be status quo, except I would say that the deals that were made between Sony and Activision, once they run out, that's it. So Sony would have to make deals. No, they couldn't do that. This would just be for distribution. So whatever Microsoft says, boom, at that point it goes. And they wouldn't get the benefits of the 10-year deal if Sony doesn't sign a 10-year deal. They're not gonna get Game Pass. They're not gonna get Call of Duty and Game Pass. So they're gonna have to spend $70. This is only for the UK, the CMA UK, not the rest. Whoever EU, if they pass it, then it's all gravy. Everybody gets everything. Everybody else who've passed it, it's all gravy. But it seems like it's just the CMA. Now the FTC hasn't done it yet, but they're waiting. They're waiting for the court date. They're waiting for all these things, all the dominoes to fall, which is fine. But I have a feeling that they'll follow suit too. And since the bombshell of Jim Ryan, or now he's telling the truth, crying, flying Jim Ryan, talking about, I don't want a new deal with Call of Duty. I just want your merger to be blocked. I just want to block your merger. And that was a quote from him. He said that at the meeting with Microsoft. And I'm like, wow. He said that to their faces? This is how I'm like, what? That's okay. So honestly, man, if I was Microsoft, I'd let the deal go through. I would honor everything. And if they don't sign the contract by the time the deal is closed, the contract's going to change. Now, well, you know what? It doesn't actually matter. Either way, if Sony doesn't sign the contract, then people on PlayStation still have to buy Call of Duty. It won't come into their PS Plus. It won't, none of that. And Sony's like, they're crying about it because of the loss of revenue that they would, incur. They'd lose revenue from the exclusivity, the DLC and all that stuff, right? They would lose revenue from the people who would switch over to Xbox and Game Pass. Whatever the percentage is, I guess it's big enough for them to cry about it, right? But this is just the impetus for them to do better, to be an actual competitor instead of cheating their way to the top, fixing the game, gerrymandering the video game industry, if you will. So, yeah, it really is asinine, and I implore you, watch the interview. It's about an hour. I mean, it's long, and I'm gonna be real. Pachter talks a lot. He says a lot of stuff, but a lot of it doesn't pertain to video games. But he says he'll talk for a couple minutes, but then he'll kind of but he'll relate it back to video games, and that's why he comes to these conclusions. Because remember when this happened? Boom. Another thing he said was about the whole Game Pass and how Microsoft is quote unquote ruining the industry. But he said that in a hyperbolic way, mainly because what he was saying is that he's ruining the industry as it was and as Sony sees it now, which is sell a console, everybody buys a console to play these exclusive games on this console. So the exclusive games pushes the sales for the consoles, and you take a loss on the consoles, you make it up on accessories and the games, right? That's the old model. That's what Sony's sticking to still. And he said basically that Game Pass has uprooted and totally messed up that whole model, in that it's not sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable for the foreseeable future. Now, Sean Layden said that, but he said it in a different context. He said it in the way that Sony makes their games, how they handle business, how they put these giant budgets on these games and they don't see the rate of return that these other games that have a way smaller budget. Well, I can't really say that because an ongoing game probably has the same budget, but they make way more money. Those free-to-play games of service games, Fortnite or whatever. So Sean Layden said it in a different context, but now it's even double because it's Sean Layden's context and his reasoning plus the Game Pass element. And the Game Pass element, he harkened back to Netflix and how Netflix ruined the movie industry. And he's right in a way, because a lot of people went to see movies. And even if they were whack movies or little rom-coms and all that stuff, they went to see them in the movie theaters. Now, if a rom-com comes out, it probably won't even come out in the theater because it costs too much money to put out in the theater. You gotta market it and all this stuff. That's all money. Or you could throw it on Netflix, or you could throw it on Hulu, or you could throw it on Disney Plus with zero marketing or little to no marketing, and you get people to sub. And that's the comparison. Game Pass is to video games as Netflix is to movies. And the console, or the traditional way of consuming games, meaning buy a console for whatever, $100, buy games for $70 now, is akin to going out to see a movie. But the alternative now is Netflix or Game Pass. And I've said this before. I said it in the context of Netflix, like Game Pass is to Netflix as Sony is to Blockbuster Video. And people are like, whatever. But I mean, Blockbuster no longer exists because they did not. They dropped the ball, and they did not put enough money and effort into their own digital, their rental through the mail service. and they should have done a digital storefront like Netflix, because they had the name recognition. All they had to do was copy Netflix exactly, and they would have been good. But I guess they didn't want to put that money up. So, but yeah, that's the comparison. And like we said, Blockbuster is done, no longer. The movie industry has changed. Only giant blockbusters exist, and all these other little B-tier movies and stuff, they go straight to VOD, and streaming. So, and he said Sony's going to be hurting for the next 10 years. They're going to be hurting, and they're going to shrink. They're going to become a smaller entity than what they are now. Mainly, they're not going to sell as many consoles, and they're not going to make as much money because they're not conforming to the changes. They're not adapting to the situations. And he said that the Blockbuster, well, the Netflix comparison was like, it was, disrupting the industry, yes, and Blockbuster and the movie industry didn't want Netflix to exist, right? The same way that Sony doesn't want this Activision Blizzard deal to go through. The same way that Sony is Vietnam, they are strongly against any type of change. They just want to keep it status quo, how they've been doing business all these years. And their unwillingness to change is going to be their downfall. And so, like I said, he said they're going to shrink, they're going to be hurting for the next 10 years, and they're, unless, I don't know what they can do in order to, I guess if they did their first party games day and date, that would help them. They need to fundamentally change what they're doing in order to stay in the game, as if they want to stay in the game in the same way that Microsoft is doing. And the thing is like, they can be resistant to the change. The change has already happened. It happened already. It's just a matter of how big it gets on the Game Pass side. And since Game Pass is kind of the only game in town that's doing it this good, and it's so funny because Sony is literally the only other corporation, company, or option to challenge Game Pass, but they refuse to do it. Just like they refuse to sign a 10-year deal. Look, you could be like, yo, Jim Ryan is the best CEO and all this stuff, he's making them all this money. That's gonna run out real quick. And it's like, it's kind of it's interesting to watch, and I'm glad that Sony isn't. They're a big entity within the gaming industry in terms of amount of consoles sold, right, and how many users they have, but they're not the end all be all. If Sony went bankrupt tomorrow, stop PlayStation production, blah blah blah, video games is gonna be fine. People will buy Switches, they'll buy Xboxes, they'll buy some PCs, whatever. The video games will be fine. So them acting like they're the end all be all of video games, oh, it's gonna hurt us, it's gonna hurt video games, it's gonna hurt consumers. They don't care about the consumers. Your boy Jim Ryan. We don't care about a new Call of Duty deal, which means we don't care about our consumers. We don't care about a deal. That translates to we don't care about our consumers, because if we did care about our consumers, we would be trying to get a deal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. But they don't care. They just want to block the deal. So if Sony doesn't care about a deal for Call of Duty and the deal gets blocked, which it won't, but imagine a world where it does. Can Activision just say, all right, you didn't care about a new deal with Call of Duty, so you got no deal. We're not making it for PlayStation. How's that work out for you? Huh? And sure, they'll lose some sales, but honestly, right now, Sony's being petty. That doesn't preclude any other company, big or small, to be as petty as Sony, giving them back their own medicine. This is a business, but it is interesting, to say the least. And it'll. I mean, as much as I'm through talking about it, it's still. I mean, day by day when stuff happens, it's like, oh man, and it kind of overshadows like the gaming news and stuff to an extent. Not really, games are always going to be there for us. So, but anyway, let me know what y'all think in the comments below. First of all, did you watch the Michael Pachter thing? I know it's long, but he's got some good points in there. Second, is Sony really just that out of touch with the industry or with anything? It really, like, I know we're making fun of Sony's hubris and all this stuff, but look what they're talking about. Look what they're doing. It's like they're really out of their minds or something. I mean, I understand what they want to happen. I understand that they want it to be their way, like a spoiled little brat, like a little child. And the how many times did Michael Pachter call them little crybabies and stuff? Is funny. It's funny. But yeah, I mean, I like to hear it from other people because it's like I can't be the only one in the vacuum thinking that Sony's out of their mind, right? I can't be the only one in the vacuum that is looking at this behavior and saying, no, you're not a nice person, corporation, whatever. I want got nothing to do with you. And you're like, oh, you're just a bot. It's like, no, I'm anti-Sony. And the reason is because look at how they act. Would you want to be around a person that act like that? Who felt like they're privileged? Oh, I deserve this. And I gotta fix the game so that I can win. I'm like, who wants to be around anyone like that? Nobody. So it makes no difference if you're a person or a corporation or Jim Ryan. If you're acting that way, I don't want nothing to do with you because you're poison. So that's all I gotta say. But I appreciate y'all hanging out. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. All stuff. And I'll catch you on the next one. Till then.